while they're getting the slide set, I think that actually Mickey touched on a point that I want to touch on. And if you remember in New Orleans when Larry Glass said, "I'm in," and Nurin announced yesterday that their inclusion enrollment actually closed, I should have also mentioned that the IGF-1 trials enrollment has also closed. And that means that both of those clinical trials are essentially now on their final lap. They're both essentially completing their girls and studying, and when the last girl in each of those studies is done, they'll lock down the data and start their analysis. So we have two reasons to celebrate, not only the NNZ 2566 enrollment closure, but also the IGF-1 enrollment and closure. And, oh, there I am. Paige made me put this picture on there to remind me of who I am when I get started. I oftentimes forget. So last year I talked about sort of my view of your world, and what I actually talked about was, in your world, you see developmental delays. You're heading off to the pediatricians and to your clinicians to get a clinical evaluation, hopefully a diagnosis, so that they can come up with a treatment, and then you're back in the game again. So that was your world as your child was developing, and part of the challenge was when, in fact, things happened, it wasn't a nice, smooth trip. We sort of got stalled somewhere down in here. So when we sort of look at this sort of layout of this natural life cycle, one of the things that's striking is that now that we know more about Rett, we all sort of say, can we slow this down? What can we do to slow this down? And we have to constantly ask ourselves that question. And as Alan had said, if the pediatricians are making earlier diagnosis, maybe we can do things that actually slow things down. We don't know that, but let's actually really push in that direction. The other thing, the question that many of us still should be asking is, do we have the best assessment tools? Are those genetic? Are they clinical? Let's continue to work on our assessment tools. And what are the treatments, and what are they designed to do? So, and will they actually help my child? And finally, when you think about this, is there physical therapy or occupational therapy or cognitive therapy designed that will actually help with any of loss of function in my child? So we need to be helping you with all of that, and I need to be pushing the research in regard to all of that. So where is the research? So we still haven't done much research in this quadrant, and we need to do more in that quadrant, and that is to understand how to slow it down, how to make an earlier diagnosis. Right now, it's a clinical diagnosis made by the panel to my left and to all of the physicians out there. But is there a faster, quicker, better way to do it? We're working on that. And again, as I stated last year, this is where a lot of the research has actually been since Huda made the initial finding about the association of MECP2 with the gene, and that is trying to essentially understand the functions of this bad boy. And as we move forward and we understand more and more, we're trying to essentially figure out how to work around it. If we can't fix it, how do we work around it? And that's part of what we're trying to do as we move forward. And the thing that many of us are always thinking about is, how do we essentially move more treatments into this quadrant? And if we can move more treatments into that quadrant, how will it essentially change Rett biology? And then how do we actually look at the physical therapies, occupational therapies, cognitive therapies in other fields, and can we incorporate that into our field to essentially help our girls? So, can we do better? Absolutely. So, Are there anecdotal stories out there that we can actually take from to essentially try to look at what's happening in this quadrant to essentially help with delaying any of the problems? Can we use the discovery-based science that sits in that quadrant of assessment to essentially take those discovery ideas and move them into medicines quicker, faster, better? And if we move them into that quadrant, can we build aggressive programs, as you just heard Alan state, and I think you'll hear both Walter and Jeff state this as well. We need essentially a very aggressive, well-thought-out clinical research program because of the numbers that we're going to need to actually do those and to test the medicines as we try to test them for efficacy. And finally, what can we learn from other fields of rehabilitation? Yesterday, Pam Diner put together, and many of you are going to go to her session tomorrow, but we heard of presentations from spinal cord injury fields and from other fields using virtual reality, and how can we adapt those and move them into our environment to actually help our physicians possibly come up with better outcome measures. So we are charging forward in that regard, and hopefully we'll be able to essentially report more on that next year with the start of our new program in neurohabilitation. So what's missing? So earlier diagnosis, we're on it. We're going to move on it. Can we move more of these ideas to medicine? Yes, that's part of what we're trying to do. That's part of the ideas behind the SCOUT initiative that we have. Take the great discovery-based ideas, move them through very, very controlled, blinded, randomized preclinical trials to see if, in fact, those medicines are things that can move forward. If they are available, can we then essentially move them and test them in a clinical environment with the folks that you see on the stage? And finally, can we adopt and bring in more cognitive, physical, and speech therapy programs that are used in other fields and adopt them and adapt them to Rett syndrome? Now, so where are we going right now? So the history of IRSF's research program has been one of basic discovery. This is where we have been working hard along with the National Institutes of Health and other foundations to essentially try to assess what the function of MECP2 is, where is it expressed, what's the biochemistry behind it, is there genetic reversal, is genetic reversal possible, are biochemical reversals possible? And at the same time, as you just heard Alan articulate the power of the natural history study, IRSF bought into and became a practicing partner with the natural history study very early, and from the standpoint of looking at the numbers of people affected, identifying variants, the standards of care, earlier diagnosis, better outcome measures, and patient registries. Those are incredibly important as we move forward. And I can't say enough to the team of faculty around the country who have participated in a natural history study, because that's what they're going to give us, all of this, which is absolutely needed as we move forward. So the basic discoveries that we've had, my view and the saying that I've coined at IRSF, RettSyndrome.org, is all of those basic discoveries are there, and what we're trying to do is correct the biology with them. But at the same time, introducing a new program that looks at neurohabilitation, understands essentially the idea of bringing new and innovative types of physical, occupational, and speech therapy and cognitive therapy together, so that as we try to correct the biology, the other side of the coin is resetting the neurology. Our girls have missed some neurologic development. If this panel of physicians can correct some of the biology with pharmacologic intervention, we then have to sit and say, how do we reset the neurology? How do we retake some of that cortical real estate and make it work for us in the way that we want it to work for us? And that's what the neurohabilitation program is. And I think if you attend Pam Diner's talks tomorrow, she'll be articulating how some of the sensory input physical therapy that they're doing will actually do that. So all of that together is essentially designed really to essentially screen compounds, look at how those compounds identify which compounds are the best to be tested, and what kind of physical therapies and occupational therapies can really reset the neurology. All of that really to do the thing that you all want to talk about and want to hear about, and what Mickey talked about is more clinical trials. And those clinical trials are designed to enhance synaptic networks. How do we then fire and wire those new networks? And how do those therapies, both physical therapy, occupational therapy, and cognitive therapy, help us gain function? So the thing that these are the opportunities that I think are missing, and we're going to, IRSF is going to push on these. You've heard me speak, cognitive therapy, physical therapy, occupational therapy. How do we bring those into the fold with our clinicians and our basic scientists? How do we identify additional therapeutic compounds? One of the initiatives that would be nice is essentially dovetailing with the brain initiative out of the NIH. How do we do better imaging? Then start looking at combined therapies, earlier diagnosis, and essentially growing clinical networks so we can do this in more places, quicker, faster, better. Now, you all know me and Janice. That's our contact information. Now, one of the things that was very interesting about our keynote speaker on Tuesday evening, his name is Mike Marisanak, and he is essentially one of the fellows who's pushing cognitive therapy quite hard. 2 years ago, you all know the Larry Glass story. Tuesday night, Mike Marisanak said the same thing. I will help anybody I'm in. Let's get started. Let's do this, and let's chase down Rett from a cognitive therapy standpoint. So this is one of the leading programs in the country called POSIT. You can go on the website and look at it. It's essentially cognitive therapy for all of us to stop your brain aging, and he wants to bring it in to our house and help us with Rett for remapping cortical real estate. So it's very exciting. It's 2 years since Larry announced his involvement, and Tuesday night, Mike announced his involvement. So that was very exciting. Now, I'm going to be around today and tomorrow and happy to take any questions that you have. Stop me in the hall, pin me up against the wall. I'm happy to answer any questions. Now, the most exciting part of this morning's is going to be hearing from the clinicians. We're going to hear about 4 clinical trials that are going on. And they're all great stories. And so, without further ado, Walter, you're up to bat.